Hello and welcome to Should I Wish Someone Told Me, a series of educational conversations where my guest and I talk about all of the shit that we wish someone told us at one point or another, relating back to the most important topic of all, you, and figuring out who that person is and learning how to accept that person and even be confident in who that person is so that you can be who you were born to be. I'm your host, Johnna Renée, certified evidence-based life coach specializing in behavioral change and teaching you research-backed techniques using brain science to help you actually feel good and become the person that you need to be in order to have the life that you want. And joining us today, we have Margot Harris of Calm Cookie _ Kids Yoga. And what we're going to be talking about is shit that I wish someone told me about creating a life on your terms. We're going to specifically be focusing on what that means, first of all. We're going to talk about why more people don't live a life on their own terms. And we're going to talk about how to actually create a life on your own terms with the goal of offering some perspectives for you to bring into your own life and supporting you in feeling seen, known, and heard, and inviting you to be open and curious to sharing your stories. And we're also going to give you some tangible takeaways to empower you to actually take that action. And we're going to have a little bit of fun along the way. So with that being said, let me introduce you to our guest today. So Margot Harris is a certified children's yoga and mindfulness teacher and author with a background in early childhood education. She is a former classroom teacher and believes in a hands-on, engaging, and whole child approach to learning. She creates and facilitates workshops for parents, educators, and caregivers, mentors, and new and aspiring kids yoga teachers, and co-hosts the Anxiety Warriors podcast, which, sidebar plug, I was on episode 55, and I spoke about how I didn't know what anxiety was. And so after you listen to this episode, go check out that episode and the rest of their episodes because they are great. And she's a woman with a lot of awesome stuff going on. And so we're super glad that you were here today. So thank you for being with us. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
No, you pretty much covered it all. I'm really grateful that I'm getting a chance to chat with you on this show. I love watching it and all of your guest interviews. I know you've spoken to my co-host, Abby Wilbur, a few times, and I always enjoy checking you ladies out on your episodes with her. And just want to thank you again for being a guest on our show because it was just such a powerful episode. And yes, everyone needs to go check out Johnna's episode on our show.
Thank you. Yeah, I just got chills like when you said that, and it's like 80 some degrees today. So yeah, it was a really good episode. And yeah, I'm just super excited to be here because it was something where it was one of those things where I was like, should I ask her? Does she want to be on my thing? And so I was so excited when it came to fruition that like, here we are. And so yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation, especially based on how our brainstorming session went in preparation for this. So
yeah, it was fun.
Shall we dive in?
Let's go. I'm ready.
Okay. So Margot, let us know, what is some shit that you wish someone told us or told you about creating a life on your own terms?
I mean, the short answer is so many things. Like I could literally, it feels like I could write a little novel about all the things that I wish I learned at a much, much younger age. But if I wanted to sort of break it down into some like tangible things that I think stand out for me in this topic and this journey, number one is just, I really wish I knew that I didn't need to know every single thing about a topic or about a way of being or about a job or anything before beginning. I spent a lot of time overthinking stuff as an anxiety warrior. And so I really wish I had learned earlier, like, hey, you don't need to know every single thing before you give it a try, before you get rolling. The second thing is just seeking the help and support of community, just being with other people that are like-minded, and seeing that as a strength and not a weakness. Because I think for a long time, I felt like, Margot, you better figure this shit out on your own. You decided to make this new change happen in your life, figure it out, like pull yourself up. And, there's plenty of research out there. You don't need other people to do it. You can just go find the resources, the books, the courses, the podcasts, and just figure it out on your own. And I'm not even sure how I got that information in my head, but like
Miss Independent, like you can do it yourself. Like, I think I know how you got that.
Yeah. Okay, good. That's perfect because that segues into my third one, which is like, letting go of the expectations of the outside world, which is probably the biggest one. Like if I had to pick the one that has had the biggest impact on how I viewed myself, my life, my potential, what or
Right.
who I could be, even, it's societal expectations of
Yeah.
people. So like, I think those are the three big things
Yeah.
that I would say.
I thank you for sharing those. I echo them. And yeah, when it comes to the societal expectations, something that I refer to a lot is like the toxicity of should and shouldn't. And I feel
Yes.
that that is something that plays into that. And so I want to unpack all of those. Let's really quick just touch base on what we mean when we say creating a life on your own terms.
Yeah.
So before we get too deep in, how would you define that? So what would you say it means to create a life on your own terms?
I would say, just speaking from my perspective, it's just giving myself the space and the support that's needed to find the clarity of my own wants and desires and vision.
Woo!
Right. And then doing the inner work that it's going to take to get me there, certainly,
Right.
but having that space and support. And that's the only way I've been able to find all the clarity I need to
Yeah.
like get my desires like front and center
Yeah.
and claim them, in my
Yeah.
power.
Yeah. I think awareness is something that I'm so excited to dive into this and share like everything that I prepared. But to take it back to what you were saying about societal expectations, I think that so many of us see what other people have and what works for them. And they're like, I'll take that. Like, I'll take, a couple of those, like, three of them. Like, I'll get one of those too, just throw it in. And we work to those things for so long. So the next thing we know, we turn around and we're like, wait, I don't actually like any of this shit. And
Yeah.
so, what I feel creating a life on your own terms means is mindfully taking action to get the results that you want.
Mm,
And I think that that is something like that so many of us miss. Like so many of us just like skip that step. And so
yes.
it's one of those things where we see people having, midlife crisis or like whatever, like we want to refer to like these oh shit moments is kind of what I like to talk or to refer to them as, where we're just like,
Right.
wait, this isn't, I mean, we've done a lot, we accomplished some things, but like, I'm not happy. And
Mm,
so creating the mindful action to get the results that you want, I think is key. And we'll talk more about that as we move on into the conversation. Um, and something that you mentioned, because let's take it from the top when you shared like the three main things so that you didn't know, you wish that someone told you that you didn't have to know everything before starting, and the asking for help and seek community is a sign of strength and not weakness, which I fucking love. And
yeah.
then obviously like to let go of the expectations of the world. And so let's dive into the first one and take it from the top. Um, because I think that, yeah, like I hope that everyone is going to be able to have some of those like, oh, moments. Like as we move through this, I feel like I'm already having them. And, I think that that is what we ultimately all want. And so, it's something that no one ever explained. And let's take it from the top then, when it comes to, not having to know everything before you get started, how did that kind of play into you creating a life on your own terms? Or rather, how did that hold you back from creating a life on your
Yeah.
own terms?
Yeah. So I like to think of it as like when you go to college, right? Or if you go to college or you go to some kind of school where you're like learning about the potential career that you're going to have, the path that you're going to take. Um, you get all the books, you do all the reading, you attend the lectures and the courses, you get all those amazing resources and you dive into them. And then when you get into the field, everything is really different. And
Mm,
everything isn't done exactly the way that you learned about it, right? And
right.
so it kind of taught me from a young age, like, you're not going to find everything that you're going to need that's outside of you.
Yeah.
Right. And so, like, that was sort of like what I've come to realize more recently. But like, if I was going to go back and think what was keeping me from starting before I had all the answers, partially it was just like having some limiting beliefs around who I could be, what I should be, as you said, shoulds before, that really landed for me. I was like, oh my gosh, she's speaking my life. She gets it. Um, and it would keep me from deciding I could be more than what I thought I should be. Like,
Yes.
I was an educator and I was a teacher for over a decade. And even though I started to lose the love and the strong desire to be inside those four walls for so long, I wasn't allowing myself to step out of them because it was a comfort zone that I wasn't ready to let go of. But when I eventually was ready to let it go, it was because I felt like my back was up against the wall. And then everything worked out great. And it was like, oh, wow. The aha moment in there for me was always, if I had listened to my intuition earlier and just leapt, even without all the facts and all the information, before my back was up against the wall. And I was just like so burnt out and so exhausted and so over it. And just was like, I don't even care. Fuck it. I don't care how the end of this year ends. I'm leaving. This is my last year. I'm leaving this field. And then I just made it happen. Right. And I learned as I went. I was able to say, oh, I could learn as I go. I don't need to have every single bit of research done or all the reading done, because if I would have kept thinking that way, I would just keep reading and reading and reading and never doing and doing and doing. And you don't really learn until you do, right? You can read forever, but it can sometimes lead to a lot of overthinking and be really counterproductive. It was keeping me from actually doing. It was like, oh, wow, it's safe for me to just sit here and dream about what I want. It's safe for me to just read about it. I don't have to actually go do anything. I can, and I could kind of convince myself this is enough for me. I can be happy just dreaming. And in reality, and I've come to learn since I have really stepped into my power these last few years and taken charge and designed a life of my own terms in a way that I never thought previously possible, that, oh, it's because I leapt. It's too bad I didn't know it earlier, right? That no one said, hey, Margot, you don't need to know every fucking thing before you just go for it. You can learn along the way. You're going to fumble. You're going to fall down on your face probably thousands of times, but that's where the learning really lives, right? That's where the change really happens. So
yeah, so much good stuff. So first of all, essentially what you're describing, I feel, and I want to hear what you think. It's kind of like you're building the bus while you're driving it.
God, that sounds frightening. But yes,
that's kind of what's happening, right? Like you get the frame, you got the wheels, like you've got the motor, like it works, but there's no windshield kind of a thing. Like there's no like, there's no like reclining seats. Like you don't have the fancy stuff, but you got the basics. And as you go, you can say, hey, this chair works better, or this seat, or whatever. I'm not a car builder, but or a bus builder. But yeah, so I love that concept, because I think that we're fortunate enough to live in an age where we have access to so much information, and it's a blessing and a curse, right? Or as I like to say, it's like a blessing and a bitch, because when our brains are overwhelmed with so much information, then what do? We do nothing, because on a very basic level, we know if we don't take action and nothing changes, then chances are that, things are going to stay the same.
Right.
And the same is what we know. The same is what is, quote unquote, safe to us, whether or not that's what's best for us. And so it's this analysis paralysis situation that happens, where we, like you mentioned, like, do I go this way? Like, do I go that way? And, I love that you mentioned as well that it's safe to be in that space. It's safe to be doing the research, because you can kind of lie to yourself, right? And say, hey, but like I'm getting data. Like I'm doing the
just
things,
collecting the data. That's it.
I'm taking action, but you're not actually moving the needle. It's kind of like, you're moving, but like in a wheel, right? Like you're on the treadmill, you got the book in front of you, like, you're doing stuff, but
you're reading about the life you want.
Yeah, but that wheel's stationary. Like that wheel isn't, you're not on the bus.
You're not on the bus. I was just going to say it.
Yeah, I love that. So you're not on the bus. And so I love that notion and that idea, because I think that so many of us are in that space. And I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying, know where you are. Like,
right.
Because sometimes like you might not be ready to start driving the bus. Like you might want to make sure your seatbelt is installed
Yeah, right. A couple of things need to be okay
Like
before you start driving that bus.
exactly. Like we do need the basics. Like I said, make sure you have the frame, the wheels, your brakes. Like make
Yeah,
sure we've got like some of the basics.
right.
Don't just, raw dog it, like, and hope for the best. Like we're smarter than, like we know better. We know better than that. And at the
Right.
same time, it's a fine line between knowing when it is time to, like you said, take that leap. Like,
Yeah.
you, in order to discover new lands, there's a quote that's like, you have to lose sight of the shore. And so that's
Mhm.
essentially what that leap is. Like you have to, and I think this goes back to inner trust. I think you have to trust yourself enough to know how to figure
Yeah.
out the in-betweens, how to know, oh, hey, those look like some good tires. Let me switch these out. Or, oh, that looks like a door or a lock or whatever, like I want to pick up. I'm glad we have this
Yeah.
bus analogy to
I know.
carry
We're
us.
going to drive it into the ground,
I was gonna
literally.
say to drive us through or to carry us through. So yeah, I love that you said that, because I think that that's a really important place to start, because like I said, while we are fortunate to have all this information, we don't, necessarily always apply it. And
Yeah.
so we can relate that to like, well, I want to make the best decision, right? But I want to remind everyone that what was best for that person that you read about might not be best for you. What's best
Yeah.
for Margot might not be best for me. What's best for me might not be best for her. And
Yeah.
so it really just requires you to get in the bus. Like you said, like oftentimes we are in the space where we read the book, but it's not the same as when we're actually doing it. And so it requires the doing
Right.
before you can actually start being.
I think at the end of the day too, you're never fully going to be ready, right? Like that's goes in hand with what we're saying. I just feel like it's such an important reminder to know that even if you have those bus basics, right? You got the frame, you got the
Right.
brakes, you got the seat, the
Right.
steering wheel, the very bare bones, you may not be ready. I love that you brought that up too. It's like you may not be ready yet. And like like I said, I was really happy in my career for the first like 7 years. And then the last couple were I was teetering on burnout and like I don't really love this in the same way anymore. I'm not waking up with the same energy and drive. And then that last year it was like I can't do this anymore. And it was
Yeah.
like if I had known by year like 5 or 6, like, hey, maybe start planting the seeds for what you really want to do, right? Which is to branch out on your own, to just maybe start a small business, and again, that's sort of separate. But yeah, I love that it's like you have to be ready a little bit, but you're never going to be fully ready. And if you don't actually take even just one comfort zone leap, right? Because for me, that hamster wheel reading the book, that sounds awesome. I could live in that hamster wheel. It just,
I
I
got
could,
AC, there's a fan on me.
right. I mean, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners can agree, right? I love to walk. If I could read and walk at the same time, that would be a great life. But am I going to really get anywhere? Like, is that everything? Don't I deserve more, right? Don't we all deserve more? Don't we deserve what we think we don't deserve, but we really do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Woo. Okay. Yes. I love this so much. So that really speaks to, I feel, a comprehensive view of like what it means to be stuck in this place, right? And what you mentioned about having like your back against the wall, it's essentially like, getting tired like of your own bullshit is kind of what I refer to it as. And I'm not saying that that's true for you, but I feel that that
Totally.
has been true for me. Okay, perfect. I feel that that's been true for me in terms of, um, waiting to take that next step. And so it's a matter of something that I feel is an integral part of taking the next step. And that's community. And that was actually the second thing that you mentioned when it comes to shit you wish someone had told you. And it's that asking for help and actively seeking community is a sign of strength and not weakness. I speak to Maslow's hierarchy of needs a lot. And I talk about how, once, the basics are met, needs for food, shelter, physical safety, the next thing we need is to experience love and belonging, which comes from community.
Right.
And that we need that before we can experience self-esteem and eventually self-actualization, which, in an ideal world, like, that's what we all want, right? Like essentially flourishing, if you will, or for terms and conditions of our conversation, creating a life in your own term.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited to hear what you have to say. This is a two-parter situation. So first of all, Why is that something that you wish someone would have told you about creating a life on your own terms? And secondly, how did you come to that realization?
I mean, the why is just because no one really makes to the top of the mountain alone, right? I mean, that to me is
Yes.
why should we seek community? Um, because it's everything you just said. It's you can do it all by yourself, I guess. I'm sure there are plenty of people out there that figure out a way to do everything on their own. And maybe it's fulfilling and brings them lots of peace and joy and comfort in more ways than one. But speaking for myself, I didn't feel that way right off the bat. I was really happy when I left my old career and started leaping into my new one
Right.
as a full-time kids yoga and mindfulness teacher and doing just that work in schools and in a variety of settings and things like that. And so that felt really good, but I was doing it completely alone. And so, I mean, what does that mean? It means that I felt lonely, right? I was doing it alone, so I felt lonely. And the work in and of itself was somewhat isolating. I was going alone into schools or into spaces. I was the only person that did what I do in those schools and spaces.
Right.
And so I didn't have colleagues in the same way that I once had when I was teaching. I didn't have people to like bounce ideas off of or commiserate with me, or to let me know that after a bad day that it's some days are bad and that the next day might be better. And here I went through that same thing or whatever. And I was missing all of that. And so while I felt like I was inching towards the designing that life, what I really, really wanted, like the pie in the sky, I felt like I was scraping at the ladder to get up it. I was really just gripping, and it was like, I was glad that my back was up against the wall because it propelled me into that change that I really needed to be propelled into.
Yeah.
But then once I was there and the high wore off, it was like the foundation was out from under me, right? Once the high of making the change wears off, then it's about sustainability. And so that sustainability came from eventually finding people that do what I do, that think the way I do, that think differently than I do, right?
Yeah.
To open my eyes to new things and ways of trying things, not just in my work as a teacher, but thinking as a business person that I was never had to think about before, like stupid shit, like, how to pay taxes for myself separately, right? It's like stuff that I didn't think about. And now I have to think about it. And I could figure it out on my own, I suppose, and really fall on my ass over and over again. Or I could reach out to people that have been there, done that, failed 100,000 times themselves, and help build that foundation with others. Right. And it was like, I wish that I had built my community that I'm so grateful to have now when I first started. If I first started reaching out to folks as soon as I made this leap, things might have happened for me faster, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want to shoulda, woulda, coulda myself or should on
Right.
myself like you can do, right? But yeah, so I think the why is just because none of us ever really get anywhere on our own. And the how's a lot harder, right? So it takes a lot of bravery to put yourself out there, to be vulnerable. Like for me, sharing on my social media platforms helped me gain a lot of self-love and self-esteem and compassion because other people were like, shit, I went through that too, or oh, I could help you with that. And
They're
it was just like,
validating. Yeah.
right, they validated my experience with the struggle. And it was like, I mean, it all goes back to taking the first step
Yeah.
out of the comfort zone, right? And it was like once I realized I don't have my feet on the ground in this work, I need support and it can't just come from me. And I started getting that support after reaching out to that one person, and that trickled out into now just hundreds of people, dozens of people that I'm close with, and then hundreds on a broader scale. And once I had that, I'm able to now help other people get to where I'm at.
Yeah.
Right. And so like it winds up being a beautiful cycle of like, once you take that first brave step, it can trickle down into all areas of your life, not just
Yeah.
with work or creating, for me, a lot of times when I think of creating my life in my own terms, I think a lot about my work life, just personally, but just for everyone listening that is thinking about creating their life on their own terms more broadly with their relationships and their families, in their communities, running for political office, like whatever the situation is going to be in service, I mean, it's going to take a lot of hands on deck.
Yeah.
right? None of those things I just said can be done alone. Even if someone's a single mom, they're still going to have to find support somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Childcare so they can go work, right? So like the idea of like you have to go through shit alone is total BS.
Yeah.
And yeah, wish I would have known earlier, but you know what? It's never too late. It's
It's never
never
too
too
late.
late. Yeah.
Okay, so again, just so much good stuff. I'm like, where do we even begin? Let's take it from the top on that. So yeah, you mentioned like maybe some people have done it themselves. Who? If you know someone who has done it all by themselves, please do comment, slide into our DMs, let us know, because I would like to know who. Like I mean, maybe I'm not saying anything, I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm just saying, to your point, like it takes a team, it takes a village. And I think that like so much stuff came up for me whenever you were talking. And when you mentioned about like starting your own business and that, you struggled and your back was against the wall and like you were on the top, but then like you felt like you were scrambling. I had this flashback to whenever I was coaching functional movement full time and similar. I started to recognize like, hey, I have a bigger vision. Like I want to dream a little bigger. I want to have a bigger impact than what's
Right.
possible within 60 minutes, 30 people and four walls, right? And
Yeah.
so at that same time, while I had that awareness, it was something where I felt I was so busy. Like, so my metaphor, I feel like we have the best metaphors. Like we had this on like whenever I was on your podcast,
Yeah.
we had a lot
We're
of
good
great,
like that over
we're
there.
so good. Like the hamsters, the busted, like, yeah, I'm so excited. So I don't even remember what I said last. It's about like backstage. Anyway, that's go listen
Oh
to
yeah, about like behind the curtain.
yes, go listen to
Yes.
episode 55. And that is you can hear what we're talking about there. It's like an inside joke right now. So go
Yeah.
get on it by listening to that. But um I feel that for me, what came up my visual whenever you said that is I felt like I was paddling to keep my head above water to the extent that I was so busy doing that. I didn't even have the thought to like look beside me and be like, oh, if you just reach your arm out, there's a life preserver. Because I was
Yeah.
just so like tunnel vision, like you got to do this, you got to do that. And by the time I was done, I was just exhausted. And
Yes.
so that is something that came up for me. And to your point about, just asking someone for help, like, could you have figured it out? Like, sure, there's courses and YouTube videos. But again, that's going to put you most likely back into that analysis paralysis. Like the
Yeah.
first thing that we talked about, you're just going to be overwhelmed because you're like, I don't know where to start. I don't want to make a wrong decision. And
Yeah.
so it's something where it just really becomes this big entangled like clusterfuck. And
Yes.
I think that getting someone to support, whether that's a community or an individual or,
A
a little bit of
mentor.
both, exactly, is so important because so interpersonal relationships, that's like you have strengths and I have strengths. And so instead of depending on me to do the things you don't know how to do and vice versa, that's a codependency. What I'm going
Right.
to do instead is teach you what I know. And what you're going to do is teach me what you know. And therefore,
Mhm.
we're both greater for it. And so we can continue on to create the life that we want, to flourish, to like be people and or be people, obviously, to be better, to be more knowledgeable about everything. And so
Yeah.
I really think that that's important as well. And something that we spoke about actually in the very last episode, episode 56, was speaking about flourishing. And we spoke about PERMA and like what it means to flourish according to the research of Martin Selig and um, Seligman, excuse me, I believe is the actual last name, but it speaks about relation and how relation is important and how relational equity is important. And
Yeah.
something that came up that I want to share because I feel it's totally relevant in terms of what we're talking about now. After we had that conversation, because you talk about things, your reticular activating system, now I'm more aware of it. You say you want a red car, now I see red cars, kind of a thing. And
Right.
so I'm more mindful of it. And so I was thinking, whenever we are in relation and in a safe relation, right? Like, I don't mean this toxic, like I'm with someone just to be with someone bullshit. I mean, like when you have a healthy relationship, it's really to the advantage of both parties because when you can effectively communicate, like I might have, let's say like something on my back, right? And in my
Mhm.
reference, this isn't really a pretty reference, but I was like, if I have shit on my back and I can't see it, I might be able to smell it. And I might be like, oh, well, it must be that person, because I'm seeing everyone else because I can't see that it's on me, kind of a
Right.
thing.
Yeah.
And so it requires having someone that you trust that feels comfortable enough coming to you and saying like, hey, no, that's you. Like,
Yeah.
so that I can do something about it. And same in terms of offering different perspectives. If I am, let's say, looking through my own lens, because we're all just looking at life through our own lens, it's what our brains do. We can't help it. Like, it's how we have come to know the world. And so if I'm painting a picture based on like my viewpoint, my worldview, I might paint this picture and I might show it to you. And you might be like, well, what is that? What is that like, speck on this over here? And I'm like, oh, well, that's, what it looks like. And you might be like, oh, actually, that's not what I see. Try on my glasses. And yours
Yes.
might not have a speck or a crack. And so yours might look completely different. And so whenever we have these healthy relationships, when we're in this community, it affords us the opportunity to have those different vantage points, to have those constructive conversations where we do get to see things from different perspectives, from different lenses, based on like, what I just said, to
Yeah.
know like what's behind my back, because you've got someone else like looking out for you. And it's something where you're both able to then grow, and you're both able to then know, hey, like I really like this one thing, I really didn't like this other thing, so that you can have
Right.
the discernment to
Yeah.
know what it is that you actually want, right? Which is what we spoke about in the very beginning. Creating a life on your terms requires knowing what that even means to you.
Right.
And so whenever you have others in your life, I feel it's just another way to support you in knowing what that looks like.
Yeah. And folks to just hold up the mirror to you too. Like when you
Yes.
were just sharing about that,
Yes.
it's like, it's not
A
just
mirror.
what's behind. It's also to remind you of how amazing you are, to
Yeah.
remind you of your strengths. Sure. Yeah. We want our community to be able to be loving and safe enough to share with each other about our pitfalls and our insecurities and our vulnerabilities and what's not working out. And, hey, here's what I didn't love about what you just said, or like, and having those tough conversations, right? You want to be able to have those people that can have tough conversations with you, while also being those people that are going to say, here's why what you did was amazing, or here's something about you that I feel like sets you apart from the rest, or,
Yeah.
it's just a way of elevating each other too, right? Because it's not just like about the kind of support where it's like, hey, I need help with my bookkeeping, so I know you know someone about that, can you send them my way? I mean, that's
Right.
all great, right? Networking and connecting that way. But sometimes it's just like as a means of remembering how deeply loved you are.
Yes.
Because if we don't feel loved, right, and as you said off the top, like seen and heard and known, are we really even going to be able to show up for the life we design on our own terms?
That
So
part.
yeah, I just remembering that we can hold up a mirror in love to the people that are in our community and that are in our space.
I love that so much. I feel that sentence like doesn't articulate the way I feel about the mirror concept. Like, yes, like what we see in others is familiar because that's actually a representation of what exists within ourselves. And that's
Yeah.
why we recognize it. If you don't relate to someone, that's because they don't remind you of you. And so that goes for both ways. If it's, kind of
Yes.
like what I was saying to begin with, like a constructive, like it might be something that's triggering some shadow, part, as people call it, or some part of you that you don't necessarily like love. Or it might be something that's really inspiring. When you see these people that encourage and inspire you, you recognize it because that exists within yourself. And so I love that you brought that up. If you're listening to us and you're like, damn, like that's cool. Like that lands or that resonates or whatever verbiage is true to you. It's likely because it exists within you. It's something
Right.
at some part you've had an experience about that. Whew.
Or something you want to experience if you haven't yet.
Yeah.
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 You can seek that out.
Wow. I mean, I don't smoke, but I feel like I'm going to need a cigarette after this.
I don't know
So,
how to take that. I guess that's
like,
good, right?
it's good. It's good.
It's good.
Like,
All
yeah,
right.
not like a stressful situation, but
God, I
like
was going to say, I've never smoked a day in my life. So I mean, I heard from people that I know that smoke, it's like, if you're stressed out, you smoke, right? People after sex, they smoke. So it's like,
right.
so it's a good thing, but it's also can be not a good thing. I feel like I get what you're saying.
I was,
Intense.
yes, I was thinking like after like the sex thing, I was
Got
thinking
it.
like it's a good thing, in that way. Yeah.
I
I
love
haven't
it.
smoked since like the 7th grade, which was just to try it out. not a fan. Not a fan.
Not a fan? Okay.
No, I mean, not knocking it, but like, I mean, also it's bad for your health, but
Right.
Yeah. So that's what I meant. Like, yes, like,
Got it.
woo, it's so
Woo!
good. Like I need to well, I don't really drink. I need to have a kombucha. I need to, yeah, like
I love
relax after
that
this.
you went from like vices that are like kind of like objectively unhealthy, right? And now it's like, wait, let's skip to kombucha, maybe a quick meditation.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I need to do something to like let all this goodness like settle.
Maybe a
So,
scream.
oh yeah, maybe. I do live in the middle of nowhere. No one would know. No one would know.
Ooh, that's kind of scary though too.
Well, that is also true, but it's fine. Like they'll deal with it.
Got its advantages.
The ones that can hear, well, that's true, but that's a whole nother episode. So I love that you brought up community, because like while it's so important, like I think we've talked about, I think that, and this is gonna talk about what you had mentioned in your third shit that you wish someone told you. It's also something that we misinterpret a lot of times because we put too much emphasis on what people think, because we want that validation, we want that approval, we want that love and belonging, we want to be part of that community. And so I think it's really important to recognize the balance there. And so you mentioned that you wish that someone would have told you to let go of the expectations of the world. And so if you would share with us, what are some of those expectations and why is it so important to let go of them?
Oh man, what are some of the expectations? It feels like there's new expectations laid upon people, just all people, men, women, boys, girls, every single moment of our lives, right? Yeah. It's like we're being fed and inundated with outside information, literally being shoved down our throats in our media, in our social media, in our communities. I mean, I have a lot of sensory processing issues. And so like just thinking about the overwhelming amounts of shit that piles on people every moment of every day that's coming from outside of us is already,
I just want to say we're bombarded with like, what is it, like 60,000 ads or something?
Oh my God.
Or it's like 60,000 thoughts, but then we've got like media ads and stuff coming at us too. So anyway, I just wanted to it's not your fault.
Shoveled. We're being shoveled.
No wonder you have anxiety, people. Go listen to Anxiety Warriors podcast. Yes. They will help you out.
We talk a lot about this kind of stuff. And, lately in the past few years, the way I've thought about expectations has shifted a little bit. And so like I have reached the place, and maybe it's just that I'm approaching 40 and it's like middle age, knock on wood, it's middle age. Hoping to live at least another 40 years. That'd be great. Assuming that I have good quality of life and all that stuff.
Right.
But, I've been starting to look at expectations as like, for the bullshit that they are.
Yeah.
Like I used to look at expectations as like when you were a student, right? Your teacher laid out the rules and, goals and milestones and expectations for behavior and the goals you had to hit, to graduate or to leave this year of school or whatever. And when I hear the word, I still associate it like that. It's like, it means that I can't elevate to the next part of my life. It means that unless I've hit these milestones or these markers, that I can't move up in the world.
Kind of like a syllabus to life kind of a thing.
Completely. Just like that. And so what I've embraced these last few years, and there's an author that I'll talk about in a moment that has helped me a lot with my reframing of expectations and why I should throw them out, is because I've realized that every single person, and you kind of mentioned, like, we all look at life through our own lens. And if we don't see it through other people's lens, it's hard to digest, right? It's like, oh, I don't see it that way. Right. Well, let me tell you why I see it that way. And so if you're open and curious, you can kind of hear people's perspectives. And so over the past few years, as I've kind of come into my power and my work and in my community that I'm building and working on cultivating and nourishing, I feel like it hasn't been linear, right? It's been all over the place. It's been messy, but beautiful. And so and I got there, and I'm still getting there, and we're still working through, because I was able to say, fuck you to the expectations.
Yes.
So that's kind of where I've landed. And then, I'm a big fan, and like probably fan is a very, very calm word. I'm like obsessed with Glennon Doyle. She's an author and activist. Her most recent book, Untamed, is like my Bible. I've read it 4 times. I will read it another 4 times, probably in the next year. And just in the title alone, right? Untamed, she
Right.
talks about cages, that we're all put in cages from a young age. Boys, girls, men, women, teachers. We're all put in boxes that we didn't necessarily choose for ourselves, that then we have to conform to, and that
Yes.
we have to stay within and
Yes.
keep us small. They're designed to keep us small and away from the
Yes.
life that we really want, and
Yes.
away from the things that we do deserve, because the world tells us we don't deserve them. Shut up, limit the way you feel about yourself. Don't believe, don't try,
Yeah.
because that's where it's safe. And as someone that has a lot of anxiety, yeah, I lived in that for a really long time. Margot, stay small, stay quiet, stay safe. And that served and helped me in many ways for many years. But then when it no longer did, and I was like, fuck this cage, right? I'm done with
Yeah.
being in here. It was, again, a lot of like reflection, a lot of asking myself, what do you want? Stop reading the fucking books. Stop looking outside of yourself. You need to sit with it, sit on it, journal on it, look within, have your community, but look within, because at the end of the day, that's one thing you can't get from your community. Your community might inspire you, but they can't tell you what your deepest desires are. They can't tell you what your biggest, most beautiful life will look like.
Yeah.
Right. That you have the power to create. And so letting go, I'll just say letting go of the expectations of the world has been a very much a learning curve, active practice. And it still is, because that's what boxes are like. That's what conditioning is like. They're meant to keep you small and quiet and caged.
Yep.
And so I keep having to remind myself, no, you're bigger than that old box. Why do you still have that limiting belief? We need to go deeper and work on that. Right.
Yeah.
When you said that thing, when somebody asked you that question and you immediately wanted to diminish your accomplishments, what the fuck was that? Right.
Yeah.
Like what, that's something that's unhealed that you need to keep working on. Right. And so it can it requires a lot of curiosity, a lot of self-reflection. But it is possible, just like with all the other things that we're talking about. Right. It's like, I know for me, just in one very personal example, my husband and I decided years ago, even before we were together, like we've been together since we were teenagers, but I always knew that motherhood was not the journey for me. I knew from a really young age. And what happens to you? I mean, I know you and I have talked about this. What happens to young women, especially as they get older, is people say, when are you doing this?
Yeah.
Oh, but you'd be such a great mom. Oh, but you're
Yes.
so amazing with kids. And it's like, yeah, all those things can be true, but I don't want to be a mother, right? Woman doesn't equal mother. And so having to
Yes.
keep saying out loud to those people, stop quieting yourself and allowing the world to tell you, because the world tells young girls from a young age that they're meant for motherhood, that they're
Yeah.
meant for parenting, that they're
Yes.
meant for nurturing. And
Yes.
while I feel like I'm a mother to all my students in some ways, and their parents and their educators for that matter, and I feel very maternal. I'm a cancer baby here, and I believe I have that, instinct, that nurturing instinct. That doesn't mean that my truest and most beautiful life involves being a mom myself.
Yeah.
And having to continuously be okay with saying and making other people uncomfortable with the fact that I'm not fitting into the box. Because that a lot of times makes people uncomfortable, especially if that's the box that they're in, or that's the box that they've chosen to be in, or whatever. And again, this is just one small, very, very personal example, but you just have to keep reminding yourself that you are worthy of the life that you want, you're deserving, and that it doesn't have to meet anyone else's idea of what life is supposed to look like. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that personal example and for your vulnerability in this whole last conversation. But particularly that part, because I think one of the reasons that so many of us, have these expectations is because we don't feel validated in how we feel ourselves, because a lot of people aren't having these conversations. And that's why I think that one of the reasons why I think it is so important to share the shit that we wish someone would have told us about these things, because it's something where, we don't know what we don't know. And my version of, what it means to be a woman might not look like someone else's. And if I've only seen it look like this one thing, then I'm going to carry on and move forward as if, like you were saying earlier, like, this is the syllabus. These are the boxes that I need to check, whether or not that is explicitly stated or not, just because that's kind of like a subtle undertone. And I think that that's something that happens to so many of us. And I actually gave a talk called The Illusion of Femininity, where I spoke about how, there's so much subtlety in suggestion. There's so much subtle suggestion in like how a woman, like, quote unquote, should and shouldn't be, whether that is, rap songs, or I mean, not even just rap songs, but like music, like, we are, in porn. Let's talk about that. We are here for men's sexual pleasure. Like, like it's something that only men can enjoy. Whether it be like the damsel in distress, which granted Disney's gotten better, but I think, for our age group, we grew up with like, Eric saving Ariel, and Prince Charming like kissing Cinderella. I don't even know his actual name. I just know that
clue.
like, yeah,
I think his name is Charming.
Right. And like,
no idea.
Look, we're already, giving him credit, right? Like, why is he so charming? Like,
right? It's in the freaking title. What?
I said kissing Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty. Cinderella, the dude like bringing back the slipper, like we're subtly conditioned to expect these certain things. And it's something that no one ever paused and, gave a second thought to. And it's something where if people aren't having conversations like this, then I'm going to be none the wiser. And I'm just going to be thinking, well, I should, just wait around, make myself look pretty, wait for someone to save me. And that's just the way that it's supposed to be. And I think that that's one example of an expectation. I know that, and so this is the episode next week, we're talking about toxic diet culture, which goes right along with another expectation that, like, we should look a certain way. And I'm not just talking about females, I'm also talking about males. Like, it's perceived like we should, quote unquote, again, have these, different like physical representations. We should have these different, vocal representations, like how we speak, how we communicate. And granted, I mean, I'm not saying like it's make it a free for all, like go be an asshole kind of a thing. But I'm saying there are certain like terms and conditions that like we don't have to abide by just because of our genders, or just because of not even our genders, just because of whatever like stereotypes or labels have been put on us. And
Right.
I think that, the expectation part is something that fortunately I was this isn't fortunately, I was a very angry child. And as a result, fortunately, I was very much like, F you, like whatever it was supposed to be the expectation, I'm using quotation marks, or the norm, quotation marks again. I was like, I'm doing the opposite kind of thing. And so that also is, that type of rebellion isn't in alignment with who I am, right? Because I'm just doing the opposite to spite. So I see the norm, I see the standard, but I'm not doing it because that's who I am. I'm doing it because I don't want to be that. And that much I know. That much I'm aware of. But again, it's not that anyone ever told me how to figure out who I am. Right. And that's why I love all of these three things that you shared, because I think that, so many of us have heard the concept of, or the phrase like, just do you. And it's something where we're like, cool, like, thanks for the support.
Right.
But then it's kind of like throwing you out in the deep end without a life preserver. It's like, what does that mean? Like,
how do I do me?
Like, how am I supposed to get back to the side?
Right.
Or like, how do I get out of the pool kind of a thing? And so you're just flailing around, as I like to call it, floundering. It's what I feel I did with most of my 20s. I mean, God bless her, or whatever you believe in. But like, like, she needed something, and I don't think it was Jesus. But like that was how I felt. Like, I knew that I didn't want these things, but I didn't know quite what I did want, and no one told me how to figure it out. And so that's, I mean, thankfully kind of been what shaped my career now into like who I am, what I do, and how I help other people do that. And so, yeah, I think that serves as a testament to what you shared about letting go of the expectations of the world.
I love that you brought up your 20s too, though, because it is important to acknowledge that it takes time sometimes, right? It
Yeah.
may take you, I mean, maybe you have it figured out in your 20s. Amazing. But a lot of people are figuring out what the hell is going on with the world in their 20s. And
Yeah.
like, I know like I'm about to turn 40 later this month, and I feel
Happy
like,
early birthday.
thanks. I'm freaking out about it just a lot. But you know, it's just, I feel like though I'm coming into this really powerful place in my life, and it took me a really long time to get here. And so like, just for everyone listening to acknowledge that it is going to take time sometimes for you to create the life that you want. It's going to take time, but that doesn't mean you can't start designing it now. And you may want to leap a little bit earlier than say I did, right? It's like leaving some lasting words. And I know, you know, we're not done with this conversation, but like, no matter what stage you are, it's not too late for you to start now. And if you're in your 20s or even younger, or even just in your early 30s, maybe even just in your mid 30s, know that like there are steps you can take right now that may feel like comfort zone leaps, and they are, but they're still a step past that hamster wheel with the book in front of you.
Yeah. God, I love that. Thank you.
Back to the hamster wheel.
And I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. And yeah, also thank you for pointing out the point about your 20s, because like your brain's still maturing as well,
Yes.
right? Like your brain doesn't, you know, so studies have suggested your brain stops maturing around age 25, but new research has shown that even
26,
though that
27.
yeah.
Yeah.
And even if that maturity is there, you can still teach an old dog new tricks by creating new neural pathways. And so that is neuroplasticity, whole ass another conversation.
Yeah.
But that is to say that, you know, if you are listening and you're, you know, whatever age, it's still possible. And so there are things that you can do. And I mean, beautiful segue. Like, how did we do this?
How it all works out somehow.
Right? Like I'm so like pat self and Margot on back.
Good job, Johnna.
Yes.
Good job, me. I do that with my students. I make them give themselves a hug at the end of class and say, good job. And they either say, good job, me, or they say, good job, and then their own name.
I love that.
Everyone listening, stop what you're doing and do that right now. Give yourself a hug and say, good job. And then your name afterward.
For listening to this and like doing the work. Because also, sidebar, I've said this on some episodes, but like this shit is not easy.
No.
This shit is not easy. Anyone who tries to tell you it is, or who you see and you're like, oh, they have no struggles, that is some bullshit. They do. They have cried on a bathroom floor at some point.
And they're just not sharing it and being authentic about it with us.
Yeah.
And that's the bullshit part too.
Yeah.
Right.
I've cried on bathroom floors. I mean, I can think of like one time in particular, but I usually don't do my crying on the floor, but I do cry pretty regularly. I cried yesterday a couple times.
I cry every day.
Yeah.
I would say at least 6 times. I mean, it could literally be about anything. I'm, again, just cancer baby, very, very hyper emotional, always was. Yeah. Labeled too sensitive, you know, at a young age. And now it's a badge of honor.
Were you called dramatic?
You know, not really. That's an interesting one. So many girls, right? I know so many of my friends were called dramatic.
Yeah.
Never really dramatic, but too much, too loud, too opinionated, too sensitive. I got a lot of other twos, but too dramatic. Strangely, no. I don't know.
Interesting.
Maybe that was something people kept to themselves, even if they thought it. But
maybe. Well, also, I mean, that's another conversation, but like, I think that we have these emotional responses whenever we feel intense emotions or intense feelings. And it's something where if we don't have the words to articulate it, like what the fuck else are we supposed to do? That's why like kids throw tantrums. So we were like, we're doing so good on track. And then we went,
the bus is pulling over for a second. We had to make a quick bus stop.
The bus went way off the rails. So
at least we brought the bus metaphor back in. But let's get back on the road.
It's how it full circle. It's how the wheels on the bus go round and round. So that's how we did that. So we've talked about, like you said, the importance. And like, you know, I've said, like we've had this whole conversation. I think that we have spoken to enough of what we have experienced and what we have learned so that people can listening to watching can kind of go, like it's important. It is important to have a life that is, yours and one that you want and not one that you just, cookie cutter got off the shelf or like took from
Yes.
culture, society, your parents, your family, your caregivers, whatever.
Yeah.
And so I think that now would be a good time, like we mentioned, like it's not easy. And, we've spoken about like living authentically. And I spoke about, wanting to feel seen, known, and heard and loved and understood for who we are, which is, creating a life on our own terms and does, flow into that. And so let's talk first before how to do it. Why don't more people do it?
I mean, fear, just straight up
Yes.
fear, anxiety.
Yes.
Speaking from very, very personal experience here. Just all the what ifs and unknowns, right? I mean, there's a lot of risk involved with creating the life because of letting go of expectations, because of all the work that it takes internally, because of all of the logistics that may need to go into it, whether it's leaving a job or, jumping into a new relationship or having a tough conversation with a loved one. I mean, it could literally mean anything, right?
Yeah.
There's a good amount of risk involved and you don't
Yeah.
know the outcome necessarily, especially if that involves another party and like
Yeah.
your job or having that conversation with another person, unless you're
Yeah.
grappling with internal stuff, which I mean, that's its own separate thing in a way, right? But like,
Mhm.
there's a lot of unknowns. I mean,
Yeah.
like simply put, for myself, it's like, I didn't know when I left my classroom how exactly I was going to get health insurance and financial stability or how long that would take and how
Right.
much work was going to go into it. But when it's time, it's time. So it's a lot about paying attention to your internal knowing, your instincts, and allowing those to lead you to a certain extent. But yeah, I think that people have a lot of fear and anxiety surrounding all those what ifs and
Yeah.
unknowns.
I wholeheartedly agree. And I think that, yeah, like you'll reach a point when you're tired of running on the hamster wheel and going nowhere. Like,
Yeah.
or like slam it into the wall if it's something where you're in an experience that no longer serves you.
Yes.
And you just keep getting like, thrown around. You'll finally be like, well, F this. And so, there are signs like you know
Yeah.
when it's time. You know when it is time to move. It's just a matter of, taking action and doing it. But I want to talk to what you said about like the fear and how, that's on a very primal basic level, like to take it back to that. It's something where when we don't have the certainty, when we don't know what the other person's going to say or how it's going to go with their job or like what these unknowns look like, we can be put in a state of fear because yeah, it's something that we can't control, we feel. And it's something where it's also like, well, can I succeed? Well,
Mm,
what if I, say this thing to this person and then they don't want to be my friend anymore? What if I lose my job?
yeah.
And these are all things that rejection from the community, that's a primal fear. Um, if you lose your job, that goes back to like getting your basic needs met, you know, being able to afford things. And
Yeah.
so a lot goes into this. And so I bring that up because I want you to know it's not lost on us that like we're not saying like it's so easy. Like excuse me, it sucked, but like we did it. It is something. There's a lot of fear and um deep rooted fears that are wired to keep you safe based on your biology. But like we said, it is possible. So how does one create a life of their own terms?
Yeah. I mean, I just, first of all, I want to acknowledge everything you said. I just really love and resonate with it deeply. So I think for me, step one has been and this was after years of trial and error and fucking it up over and over again. And it's still something I actively have to work at and practice. But the first thing is working hard to create sustainable habits for myself. And now I say sustainable because in the beginning, I was like, okay, brand new day. Here's 30 things for you to do, Margot. And guess what? Too much anxiety, too much analysis paralysis, too much which I love that phrase, by the way. I'm going to keep using it forever and ever. So thank you. Too much
It's a good
overthinking,
one.
right? And unintentionally overwhelming myself with when I don't have the time to get any of that done. Or maybe I have time to get a couple of them done, but because I've made this list, now that's an expectation that I've made for myself, and I'm immediately setting myself up for failure. Right. And so working to create what you feel is a habit that you can comfortably and sustainably continue to do towards whatever end, right? In creating a purposeful life on your own terms. And so what that looked like for me was asking myself, what do I have enough time for today? And so I needed to take time to meditate on that, to journal on it, to consider how and why, right? I need to get these couple of things done. And so, yeah, that's like the biggest number one I could say is like, choose 3 things that you can do today, no matter what it is. If we're talking about work, if we're talking about relationships, if we're talking about, a big purchase you want to make, or all of the above, right? Just like, what is some tangible things along with the rest of your insane, chaotic life that you have to deal with? Like friends, family, expectations at work, kids, whatever you've got going on. Can you get 2 or 3 things? I like 3. I try to do everything in 3s done today, and have those things be a huge win. Can you look at those things as a win? Write them down, right? Make them realistic. And sometimes if you get those 3 things done and then you have time for something else that wasn't on your list, amazing. Then you can cross something off from the list tomorrow or next week, right? And that's one more thing that you did because you didn't set yourself up for failure by putting too much on your overloaded plate, as it is. And so like, for example, it's like, I always had this problem of like, I have to cold email 30 schools, right? I need to do that. I want to get it done by this date. And so I've already made it too big, right? I've made it way too big. And so really what I need to do is draft an email, work on that, to have that be my one task when it comes to this assignment that I've given myself, which is to email 30 schools. I'm going to draft the email, make sure I like it. And then that's it. That task is done for the day. Right. And then I'm moving on to something else. Now, if I'm thrilled with it, maybe I send out those 30 emails. Maybe I send out 5 and I'm thrilled with those 5. And I can say, wow, I did something past my to-do list. And it's because I didn't force myself to say, here's one of 100 or 30 things that you have to do today. Otherwise you're a failure and you didn't get what you had planned done. So I would say that's like first and foremost is try to make whatever it is that you're creating for yourself day to day sustainable and bring some joy to it. Right. Because I feel like at the end of the day, we're not always going to love the busy work or the shit that we have to do when it comes to our business or again, like thinking about life in general, those tough conversations. These may not be joyful things, but then are you scheduling joy? Maybe one of your 3 things has to be take your dog for a walk for 30 minutes, right? Or like whatever joy looks like for you today, potentially. The sun's shining. I'm going to go sit outside and with my journal for 5 minutes. Like it could literally be anything. Figure it out. What brings you the most joy? Write it down. Have it be part of your schedule and your routine because you deserve it. And it's going to sustain you in the long run, right? Bringing joy to menial tasks or scheduling joy that's away from those menial tasks as like reward for those menial tasks.
Right. Creating your dopamine reward system.
Exactly. Yes. I'm a big fan of like Marie Kondo. She's always talking about sparking joy and like creating things in a concise way, organization. And these are like pie in the sky for me. So like, these are things where like, if I can do like a fraction of what Marie Kondo does, like in say a room of her house, I'm like thrilled with like being able to do that just on my desk today.
Right.
Right. And so like being able to look at the little things as wins on your own personal journey. Maybe organizing your desk is really freaking easy for you. And congratulations. For me, it's a lot. And so like, having that on my to-do list and getting it done feels really fucking awesome. So deciding what you need to do and making it sustainable for yourself that way you can keep it up. Finding the joy, creating joy in your menial tasks or finding and scheduling space for joy. And just like all of now, I recently learned this on an episode of my podcast that I do with Abby, Anxiety Warriors podcast, like we've talked about a few times. And we had an awesome guest on and he taught us this amazing reframe, which like we had heard throughout our lives, but now I've really begun to embody it. And it's just like practicing an I get to mindset versus an I have to mindset.
Yes.
And so just saying, you don't have, I mean, you don't have to write those 10 emails. I mean, maybe I do, right? But like you get to write them.
Right.
Right. You have your own business. So you get to do that. You're lucky and privileged enough to be able to do that work. You may not find it fun or enjoyable, but guess what? You're not in that cage of a classroom anymore. So that means you get to do this work.
Yes.
Right. I get to exercise every day. I may not feel like it one morning, but I know I got to get it done because I feel really good while I'm doing it. And then very, very good after I'm done doing it. And so practicing, and I have the luck and the privilege to have a sound body and mind to be able to push it to new heights and levels and, you know, more dopamine levels there. But like, I feel like y'all know what I'm saying here.
Yeah. So we're going to take it, I believe, in reverse here. So yes, like doing things for pleasure, not punishment. The way that I like to think about it is it's choice energy over chore energy, right? No one wants to do chores, but if you choose to do this, if you're doing it because, you know, you're getting pleasure out of it. And that's something that I tell people a lot too. Like, you know, you get to find things that like work for you. You don't have to do the shit that doesn't work for you. If sitting there like writing an email is really challenging for you, try voice noting it, try transcribing it, see if that works for you. Like, you don't have to do it the same way that the people in the book that you read, or, you know, whenever you were in your analysis paralysis, like you don't have to do it the way that those people did it. You can use them as inspiration. You get to, taking it to your praise, you get to figure out what works for you and put those tools in your toolbox. And the things that don't never have to go in.
That's right.
Which I think is important. And I love what you said about, you know, creating something that's like sustainable. Whenever we were having our brainstorming session, you were like, you know, if I've written 30 things on my to-do list, then I'm already fucked. And I was like, yeah, oh my God, has Margot seen my to-do list? Because like, I mean, I don't want to like, what is this? Like, it's a page.
I see a full page there.
It's a full page of like, that's supposed to be my journal. What am I doing? Like just writing my to-dos. And someone showed me something recently when it comes to like ADHD brains, which I like have self-diagnosed myself, because the more I learn about it, the more I'm like, oh bitch, that's you. And it said that whenever we have these like long lists, you know, like whenever, you know, someone who has ADHD like sees something, it's a visual cue to it. So that's already like overwhelming just to see that list. And it's something where, you know, if we look at it, then we're going to start to, you know, oh, actually, this should be first. And actually that, because Johnna loves lists. If you look at, I mean, I just like, I showed up my journal for people who are listening, but it was just a long list of stuff. Like I love making lists. I mean, I don't love it, but like it happens. And like, I feel like it's going to be effective. And so what they were saying in this video was to try doing like timed things, which I do to myself sometimes because I'm like, you've got this amount of time. I thought it worked for me because that's what I do with workouts. I'm like, you've only got this long to work out, do the thing, and then like, you know, move on. And so with that, the Pomodoro technique is something that people can use if that serves you. Because what I found works for me is like a hybrid. Like I need like this is what needs to get done, right? And then from there, applying the time limit. And I found that that's a really good blend. And I love what you mentioned again, like to reiterate about the sustainability and like the systems. Like I talk about systems a lot. And James Clear in Atomic Habits, which sidebar, great book. If you know, have a goal, it's not that you are going to suddenly rise to the level of your goals, right? We don't rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our systems. And so it's something where your brain looks for patterns and your brain's going to do what's always done. That's why you can't, you know, just do the thing, even though, you know, that's what you want to do. And that's, you know, for good, like your overall, like, you know, best self, but you don't do it. It's because your brain isn't used to doing it. And so 90% of everything you do is on a subconscious level. So your brain's just going to do the same thing it's always done because that's the shortest distance between 2 points. And so it requires you creating a system so that you can then, you know, actually follow through on doing the thing. And also, you have to make sure that you know why you're doing that thing, because a lot of times why these systems don't work for people is because we are trying to solve practical and logical, we're trying to apply practical and logical solutions to adaptive and developmental problems or concerns. And so we have these adaptive things that we're doing because that's, supported us in the past. And if I'm just going to try to slap a logical solution on it, who I am at my core being is this adaptive behavior. And so I don't care how many logical things you give me, it's not going to work. Because that's not who I am. Like that doesn't, speak to my identity. And so it's important that you know the difference there. And so that you aren't trying to, just, well, the apps aren't working, the lists aren't working, like, the Eisenhower matrix and the Pomodoro technique, like these things aren't working. I'm just a failure. No, you're not. No, you're not. It's because there is something within you that is blocking you. And energy is never created nor destroyed. So you just have to figure out what that thing is so that you can go from having one foot on the gas, one foot on the brake, to putting both feet on the gas in the direction that you want.
Yes.
Which, when it comes to creating a life on your own terms, I would say, how do we do it? First and foremost, you have to figure out what that looks like for you, which is something that we have spoken to throughout this entire conversation. And so, how do you do that? Well, that's another conversation, but you have to figure out who you are. You have to figure out what, this life looks like for you. And when you do that, then again, because it's not just about the awareness, right? Like we can read the books, we can know the things, but until you actually start to drive that bus, you're just going to be on the hamster wheel. And so it's something where once you realize what your ideal life looks like, then and what your terms are, you actually have to take action on moving forward to create that. So those are the things that I would say.
I love it. And I love just the idea of you can create your own systems, right? I love that framework of like, we fall into our old systems. And if those aren't working, those aren't helping us get to where we want to go to lead the life that we want to lead. You can work from the ground up to build new systems, right?
Yes.
And that's through those sustainable habits. So so good.
I love that. And I love too that, so what you just reminded me of is like, sometimes like the system, and that's, essentially what I was saying, like the thing that you've been doing, you're doing not because it's cock blocking you, for the lack of a better term, but because it served you at some time. And so you might need to adjust it a little bit. You might need to, like Margot said, just find a whole new one. Like it's going to depend. But the more aware you are of who you are and what you want, the easier it's going to be. I didn't say it's easy. I said it's going to be easier for you to know if you do need to trash it, get a new system or a new thing or a new coping mechanism, whatever, intensive, whatever fits in this situation or your situation specifically. It's going to be easier for you to know if you need a new one, if you need to adjust it, and to know what it might look like to do that and how to actually get there. And again, it all just goes back to knowing who you are, the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it, and knowing what it is that you want. So,
and having love and compassion for that person.
Yes.
As you keep diving into that authenticity.
Yes.
So good.
I talk about that a lot. So self-love, I think, and I teach, is really self-acceptance at the end of the day. Like people are like, bath bombs, buy the shoes, eat the cake. And I'm like, cool. Yeah, that's the fun stuff. But self-love is also accepting these parts of yourself that you don't like the fact that you're jealous, the fact that you like leave the cap off the toothpaste, or like, small things to like big things. And so, and having compassion for that person. I love that so much.
Yes.
Woo! Okay. Well, we have covered a lot. I feel we talked about, what it means to create a life on your terms. We have talked about some shit that you wish someone would have told you about creating a life on your terms. I've shared some shit I wish someone would have told me. We have given tangible takeaways that you can use like right now to get clear on, what it is, or some ways rather, get clear on what that life looks like for you. And then some things that you can do, creating systems, creating sustainability, and bringing joy into your life, which is, I love that you brought that up, because, and I didn't even talk about that just most recently in my last little spiel, but something that we talk about or something that's been proven in positive psychology is when we have these good thoughts, hormonal cascades, like it creates more good emotions. And yeah, that's something we spoke about in the last episode. And so if you're interested in hearing about that and the science and all that goes into that, check out episode 56. We're talking about flourishing. And so, I mean, I had fun while we were doing it. So I feel like we accomplished
much
all of our
fun.
goals today.
Yes.
So what would you say are some final takeaways that you have for everyone today?
Yeah. I mean, it would light my soul on fire to know that some folks came away from this chat with the knowledge that they can have power and agency over their own experience,
Yes.
and that it's never too late to go for something that calls to you to make a change in your life. Because if it lights that fire in your belly and you're passionate about it, or maybe your back's up against the wall too, or, whatever the reasons might be that you have, that it has the power to change your world, right?
Yes.
Taking those baby steps or those leaps even has the power to change your world, not just the world. Because if you're feeling good, guess what? That energy is going to ripple out past you. But it will change yours, right? It may not change everyone's world, but I think that it will, but it will certainly change yours at the very least. And oftentimes, when a person or people witness you stepping into your own power and living truly authentically, it'll inspire them to believe in themselves, right? And to believe that it's even possible, and maybe seek to do the same for their own lives.
Mirrors.
Yes, mirrors. Exactly.
Yeah. I thank you for sharing all that. I think that's beautiful. And when you mentioned about like your back being against the wall, I mean, this might sound a little bit like, like shut up, but I'm going to say it because I feel this is some shit I wish someone had told me. Instead of looking at it as a trap that you need an escape from, just kind of like reframe that and look at it as, like you mentioned, like a cage that it's time to step out of.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't have to be this, it doesn't have to be this situation where you wait to the last minute. It's really traumatic. It can very much be something where, because I mean, I'm not saying that's what's happened for everyone, but that's what happened for me. Like I waited until like the last, I was like, F coaching, functional movement. I don't want to do it. I don't want to see it. I mean, I moved back. Like I do coach it now again, but at the time I was so burnt out. And so some shit I wish someone had told me is that like, to have the awareness to not let it get to that point where you hate the thing that you once loved. Like it doesn't have to get there. And so instead of feeling like like I need to get out, like, screw this, use this conversation, use your experience as an opportunity to say like, okay, I'm clear, because like I said, like, like I'm clear on the fact that this isn't working. Instead of trying to make it work and like sticking it out and, for whatever reason, because like, you don't have to, like, that's some shit I wish someone had told me, like, you don't have to do that. Get curious about what it is that you actually want and what would bring you joy to sharing that. So that's what I have to say. And with that, where can they find you? What do you have going on?
What do I have going on? Gosh, I feel like I have a million things going on. I teach children's yoga and mindfulness. I live in New York on Long Island. So I do a lot of work in schools and just in different public community spaces, teaching class. But I also teach virtually. I love to connect with folks through the miracle of Zoom. Because I'm a children's book author. I love doing author visits. I've been able to do them all across the country. And just be able to share my story and do interactive read alouds and yoga with the kids through this magical platform of Zoom. And so I love partnering with schools, because even though I left the cage of my classroom as a classroom educator, bringing the work that I do now into schools is still the most passionate thing. It's still the thing that brings me the most fire and joy. And that I feel like, again, more shit that I wish that I knew as a kid, right? That like you have the power inside of you. And I know that the pathway of yoga and mindfulness has changed my life. And so that's why I love insisting on bringing it to kids during their school day because it's just as valuable as math, science, social studies, and PE and all the things.
Yeah.
Because it's more than just a movement practice. It's mind, body, and soul. It's social emotional learning. There is just endless transformative benefits to the practice. And so you can connect with me on Instagram. As you mentioned off the top, I'm at calmcookie_kids yoga. And then, of course, because I'm an anxiety warrior, my co-host Abby Wilbur and I host a podcast there. New episodes drop every Friday, Anxiety Warriors Podcast. And you can join us on Instagram also at Anxiety Warriors Podcast. You can visit my website to learn more about me and about my work and journey. I'm at calmcookie.org. And yeah, I love talking to folks in the way that I know you love talking to folks. I love sharing what brought me to living my best authentic life, which is using yoga and mindfulness, and now being able to share that with so many kids and educators and parents, not just here in New York where I live, but also now because of, technology all over the place. And so it brings me so much joy. And I would love to connect with anyone that's interested in talking about yoga or mindfulness or anxiety or about feelings. If you're looking to connect with me about, some of the shit that you heard me share today that resonated with you and you just want to let me know or have a quick convo, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all that. And I'll be sure to link everything in the description so that it's a quick, just tappity tap. Bonus points if you know what movie that's from over to the link that she referred to. And so yeah, you'll be able to find all that in the description there. To give you an example of what I do, I think I mentioned that in the beginning, but something I want to speak about is the fact that we've talked about creating a life on your own terms today. And something that I work with clients on is their self-confidence and fulfillment, right? And the reason that self-discovery is so important, like what we've spoken about today, it really comes down to you knowing, what it is that you want. And that comes from knowing who you are. And that's what I help people to figure out. And, we have also spoken about how there's a lot of literature out there, and it can be a situation of analysis paralysis. And so when we find things, it's something where, it works for a little bit and then it doesn't, or, it just doesn't seem to land with us because you are your own person. And it's something where I have found that people I, work with, people I talk to get really frustrated because they're like, this self-help stuff isn't helping whatsoever. And so I created a series that is free that explains why self-help isn't helping and what does instead from an evidence-based perspective. And so if you are interested in that, I will link that below as well. Or you can head right on over to whenselfhelpisn'thelping.com, and that's just all spelled out. And you can learn more about what I'm talking about there and get that series so that you can start to figure out who it is that you are and how to create a life on your own terms. So that is it for our conversation today. If you got anything from it, I ask that you please do us both a favor and share it with someone who would also benefit. And be sure to continue the conversation with us in the comments and our DMs. And since this is coming out on a Monday, happy Monday, y'all, make sure to check my stories over on Instagram at Hey Johnna Renée, because I'm going to be posting some questions to see how this lands after you have taken some time to listen to it and let it marinate and think about it, to see what's been true for you and your experience when it comes to creating a life on your own terms. And that's going to be happening again. My Instagram stories, Hey Johnna Renée, on Wednesday. That's going to be July 6th. And then from there, we are going to be having the after party, which is going to be on Friday the 8th, 3 p.m. Eastern, where we will recap this episode and where we will share what you shared with us in those poll results, any questions that you slid into our DMs, any comments that you also asked, and we will also be answering any questions that you have live and making sure to do some live coaching if there is a particular instance that we can respond to, but if it requires a little more back and forth, because again, there are no one size fits all to this life thing that we're all doing. And so it's through conversations like this and through that awareness and through the conversation and through the community, be strong and ask for help, that you will be able to create the life that you want. And so we hope that we have given you some inspiration today. Margot, thank you so much for being here. I knew this was going to be fun. I can honestly say I had way more fun than I thought I was going to.
Oh, I
So
love it. I had
thank
so
you.
much fun too. Thank you so much for
Cool.
being, for allowing me to hang out with you. This was awesome.
Thank you so much for hanging out. And everyone listening and watching, thank you for being here for this educational conversation where we share some shit that we wish someone had told us about creating a life on your own terms. And we look forward to hearing what you have to say. And we'll see you then. Bye.
Thank you.